Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to Friday Morning at the Fun House with Pete Pardo and Martin Popoff here on Sea of Tranquility. Good morning, Martin. How are you today?
Morning, Pete. Doing fine, doing fine. As I was saying before we went on, I think I'm as ready as I'm ever going to be for this one. This is quite a challenging one we've got going here.
Exactly. So today is also another episode of Ranking the Album. So Martin and I do like a wide variety of topics here on Friday morning. Sometimes we follow along the lines of regular show themes that we have. Sometimes we just kind of do something completely different. Today we're going to do a Ranking the Album show. So this is just as much a Friday morning show as it is a Ranking the Album show. Little Feat. So this is a band that a lot of you have asked for over the last couple of years. It's a band that I like a lot. Martin likes a lot. They got a really big catalog. So we've decided rather than try and stumble with some of the later stuff and the really early stuff, we're like, you know what? We're going to pick out our top 5 and then maybe a couple honorable mentions at the end. So a really good catalog. This is a weird band. So Martin and I have talked about Little Feat on numerous occasions. This is a band from Los Angeles, California. And they play a style of music that a lot of people have a really hard time trying to categorize. Are they Southern rock? Well, they're not from the South. Are they like blues rock? Well, sort of. Some people call them swamp rock, New Orleans, Cajun. They're not from any of these places, but yet they play a style of music that is usually known as kind of originating from the southern point of the United States. But really cool band. Lowell George was the big star in the band. Of course, the vocalist and guitar player who died in the late 70s after, a bunch of years with substance abuse. And some folks thought that they were going to lose their identity when he was gone, but they proved that they can continue on. And they had a lot of success after he passed away, and they, kind of regrouped a bunch of years later. So a lot of albums here. Our top 5. Martin's going to kick us off with his number 5.
Yeah, so interesting. Yeah, I mean, just to sort of compound on that. I mean, I guess if you're sort of Cajun rock, you are kind of a Southern rock band, right? And they're also part of this whole troubadour set, and Linda Ronstadt and Eagles and J.D. Souther and all that, Jackson Brown. So they fit in that as well. Warren Zevon. They remind me a lot of Warren Zevon at times. But yeah, really hard band to categorize. This was a hard one to do, and we are, like you say, doing top 5, but mentioning a few other things along the way to sort of get us to a full ranking. So I'll start with Feats Don't Fail Me Now. 1974. This was there you go. This was a really cool record. I found myself not sure how this was going to go. I thought I was going to be really contrarian on this whole list, but as I went into the catalog, I really felt like I kind of got less contrarian as I went along. And so picking as my number 5, Feats Don't Fail Me Now. So we're a few albums into the career. But this is still the classic era with Lowell George. Love Lowell singing. Number 5 was tough for me because it was wrestling it out with one of the Sean Murphy era albums, maybe something like Kicking It at the Barn. And it also, for me, wrestled it out with the debut, which is really strong and fierce and so much talent and weird thing, interesting things going on, but it's not quite the Little Feat sound at that point. So I was right on the edge with this one. But we've got Rock and Roll Doctor, one of their best songs in their standard sort of style of that complicated proggy Allman Brothers Cajun rock sort of feel. So it's getting away from straight, boring conservative folk rock, and it's just these kind of swirling cool rhythms, which, when Allman Brothers, they get up that kicking up the dust, they have that swirling sort of feel to it as well. So that's a great one that way, really laid back. Oh, Atlanta is one that I like. I'm kind of surprised I like it because I usually don't like those kinds of songs, but it's such a huge song for them. Skin It Back's great. Feats Don't Fail Me Now is awesome. I mean, and that's more of your funky Little Feat style. The Fan is really a proggy one. And this is the album that has the good version of Cold, Cold, Cold. The version I like the most. It's not the heavy caveman version, which is actually on an album that I like a little more than this album, but this is the definitive version of Cold, Cold, Cold. Tripe Face Boogie. I was never a huge fan of that, but yeah, and Down on the Road is also their cool standard sound. So yeah, this is a good solid Little Feat album from that original sound era. There you go, number 5.
Yeah, like you mentioned the whole funky thing, because that's another element of this band we didn't mention right off the bat. It's that there's a lot of funk going on in this music, and I do want to mention, because we're talking about the classic era of the band. So we've got, of course, Lowell George on vocals, guitar, other assorted things, and he's the guy who did most of the slide guitar. Really good slide guitar player. Paul Barrere on guitars and vocals. Sam Clayton on percussion and whatnot, Kenny Gradney on bass, fine bass player, Richie Hayward on drums, and Bill Payne on keyboards and vocals. So you had a couple of guys who sang in the band, but a really, really talented group of individuals who could kind of play all sorts of different styles, which I think was pretty neat. All right, my number 5, I'm going to go to 1975's The Last Record album. Cool covers on most of these too, I would say. Which is always nice to have.
Framed up one of those.
There's the vinyl. There you go. Yeah. Nice colorful album cover, with some. If you really look carefully at a lot of these little, I don't know, Martin, if you want to hold it a little closer, there's all sorts of weird things going on some of these covers. You got to really look carefully to see. I mean, what is that? Like a mound of Jello in the back, and you got like an amphitheater there, and all sorts of really neat stuff happening. Very busy, but yet kind of cool, and it's the 70s, cool album covers all over the place. Romance Dance, good rocking track that kicks off the album. All That You Dream's got a lot of groove. A lot of these songs have tons of groove. Funky, jazzy, Day or Night is kind of like an extended jam. I like that. These guys could really jam. If you've heard the Waiting for Columbus live album, you know what that's all about. Below the Borderline, another good funky tune. Great keyboards from Bill Payne on that song. You got Somebody's Leaving. There you go. Yeah, it's one of the greatest live albums of all time. A lot of jazz influences on Somebody's Leaving. The pretty rockin' Mercenary Territory. I think it's a really solid album, start to finish. Lowell sounds great on this. You were right, Martin. He is a really, really good singer. And you got Bill and Paul singing on this album as well. A lot of groove on this album. I think it's fantastic. That's my number 5.
Cool. All right. So here I am going to be a little contrarian. Let It Roll is my number 4. This is kind of, I believe this was sort of my entry point to Little Feat when I really kind of got into them and started going into the back catalog. I believe this is one of the earlier ones I got, and obviously it's not very early. This is like 1988. Yep. But I love this record. Hate to Use Your Lovin' is one of my favorite Little Feat songs of all time. I love One Clear Moment. The production's great on it. It's a sort of, it's a carry forward of the same sort of sound. Now, what happens? Obviously, Lowell George dies. What's the date on this? It's 1979 sometime. 1979. Lowell George dies, and then Little Feat is no longer for a long time. They come back in 1988. Fred Tackett is sort of the replacement for Lowell George, if you can replace a great like Lowell George. But he even was a session guy on some of those early things, and he was a buddy of Lowell George. He's on Lowell George. Thanks, I'll Eat It Here, or whatever that solo album he had, right? So Fred is a perfect choice. It's sort of like Grisman could have replaced Jerry Garcia, right? It's the same kind of thing. So Fred is in there. But the other good thing about this record is Craig Fuller is in on vocals. And I love Craig's vocals. I'm not a big Paul Barrere vocal fan. I'm not crazy about his voice. I don't think he pushes enough air when he sings, sort of thing. So I'm not a big Paul fan on the straight singing part. But Craig does an amazing job on this, and Craig kind of brings that smooth soulfulness that Lowell George had as well. But obviously, it's 1988. We're into glitzy, fairly nailed down productions. It's a little bit, the magic and the groove and the mystique of early Little Feat can't be there. But Let It Roll was a bit of a hit. This went gold. So as a reunion album, and they were a pretty successful band. I look at their Spotify listens, and they get a lot of listens, and they had some gold records in the past as well. Yeah. So they're a little more successful than I kind of remember. Hanging On to the Good Times was good on here. Cajun Girl. So yeah, you get a lot of that sort of accordion thing going on, but yeah, I thought this was a really good album. I've always had a lot of time for it, and even the follow up, this Representing the Mambo album, as well. But you know, as I went through this one again, I realized I definitely like less of the songs as much, and it wasn't going to be on my list. But when we first talked about doing this show, I almost thought representing the Mambo would get on for me, but no. So there you go. Number 4, Let It Roll.
Well, I don't think that's a contrarian choice at all, because my number 4 is Let It Roll as well.
All right.
It's a really strong album, and I agree with you. I think it's stronger than the Mambo album, which has a couple really, really good tracks, but I think this is stronger overall. And I got to say, I think Craig is a great fit for this band. Some of you might know him from Pure Prairie League, another pretty good band with great vocals and great harmonies and things like that. Really good album. You know what? This album reminds me a little bit of similar period Atlanta Rhythm section, as well as the Grateful Dead from the same time period. It has that kind of 80s slickness going on, but I think there's still enough of the Little Feat characteristics that it fits in nicely with the rest of the catalog. I mean, you mentioned all the really good songs. Let It Roll is great. The title track, One Clear Moment, good hook on that. I Hate to Lose Your Lovin' is a great song, really good song. And that was a pretty decent hit for them.
Yeah.
Listen to Your Heart, another good one. Business as Usual. I don't know. I like it. I think it's really good. Change in Luck, another good song on here. Yeah. Really good album. Sits well in their catalog, I think. And I also think that's one of the ones that I kind of gravitated to first, because this band was not even on my radar like in the late 70s, early mid 80s at all. I think it's until they made their comeback that I was like, oh, okay, because the one song would be on the MTV all the time. It's like, oh, this is pretty good, you know?
Yeah. It's funny, you know, not being on the radar as it was for me too. I think that had a little bit to do with those album covers, which, you know, Neon Park, sadly, he died of ALS. I think he was only 52 or something like that. But so he's the guy that did all those album covers, and they're kind of weird in that they you know, if you're a young metalhead or whatever, they just kind of pass you by. They look kind of like, what is this strange band? This band looks like it's going to be too hard to get into or something like that. And then you know the whole history, and it does come from the country rock end of things and that. So yeah, I just never kind of paid attention along the way. But I like your mention of the slickness too. You know, of Atlanta Rhythm section and Grateful Dead. Another band that feels like it's in somewhat the same wheelhouse as Little Feat is Steely Dan. You know, that really smart intellectual you know, use of those tools from LA country rock, but they're going to take it way further than someone like the Eagles was going to take it. They're just going to like throw everything at you, and then they're going to be like basically a progressive rock version of that stuff, right?
Yeah, it's good.
So that's what I like about it. So okay, so my number 3 is Dixie Chicken, 1973. Great album. There we go. Another Neon Park situation there. I love Two Trains on this. It's one of their standard funky sort of things. Great recording. Roll 'Em Easy is one of those really good contemplative, mellow Lowell George acoustic sort of things. Yeah, I'm not crazy about On Your Way Down when they get into that sort of dark, morose R&B zone. And I'm not crazy about the straight funk. And anytime Little Feat does straight blues, I'm not crazy about it either. Kiss It Off, a dark, mellow one, kind of cool. Fool Yourself, one of my favorite Little Feat songs of all time. Again, that's one of these ones that approaches that, you know, emotional giddiness of a like a Warren Zevon at his peak, with the big epic, you know, the epic, gorgeous melodies. Again, that Avocado Mafia, you know, troubadour thing. You also get those sort of melodies, I find, with Jackson Browne quite often. But yeah, Fool Yourself is just a tour de force, one of the greatest of all time. Also one of the greatest of all time, Fat Man in the Bathtub on here, which is another standard, complex, swirling, proggy, percussive Little Feat classic with just those great Jackson Browne, Warren Zevon kind of melodies. Yeah, Lafayette Railroad, not crazy about that. Juliet, too clavinetty and dark kind of for me. But so this is a little bit down my list, but it's got some of the all-time classics. There you go.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. More about that in a little bit.
Okay.
Feats Don't Fail Me Now, my number 3 from
all right.
74. Everything that Martin said, I dig this album a lot. Rock and Roll Doctor, great song. I also like Oh Atlanta a lot, and sometimes I wonder why, but it's just really this very engaging song. It's got that anthemic feel, you know. Skin It Back is funky and just undulating. Good song. Love the title track. It's got these great rhythms. I mean, the rhythm section of this band is just off the charts, and I love the 10-minute medley, man. Cold, 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 and Triple Face Boogie. I mean, it's a really good album, start to finish, really strong. Always like to pick on the back as well, you know. So yeah, that's my number 3. Dig it.
Cool. All right. So my number 2, I have no apologies for this, and this is a contrarian choice, but I shall explain. Ain't Had Enough Fun. 1995, the first album with Sean Murphy. Love Sean's vocals. I mean, I'm surprised that, you know, a female vocalist coming into this band and taking over most of the vocals, you know, usually that isn't going to sit well with me. Like, you know, when this band has had male vocalists all through the whole career. Loved when Sean came in, loved these records. You know, I was pretty darn close with the likes of, you know, Chinese Work Songs getting into this, with Under the Radar getting into this. Kicking it at the Barn. I mean, I really like these albums, but Ain't Had Enough Fun, just start to finish. You know, starting with Driving Blind, which is one of my favorite Little Feat songs of all time, as is Blue Jean Blues, which is not the ZZ Top song, and it's not a blues. It's just one of these cool, melodic, funky, tour de force Little Feat songs, as is Cadillac Hotel. So the first 3 songs, it starts off so strong and it never lets up. There's a lot of Cajun sort of feel, and you know, the accordion and stuff on here. There's a good band shot with Sean, you know, right up front in there, in the band. You know, and again, kudos, you know, Pete, you mentioned the whole lineup. I mean, the lineup of Little Feat is essentially has stayed as standard as it could have throughout the whole thing, even though they go all the way back to like 1970. You know, so all these guys are there, and they make these changes, these, you know, in this case a pretty big change, but you know, everybody else sort of stays standard and holds down the fort. But Heaven's Where You Find It, an amazing song off this as well. Borderline Blues, again, not a blues, and it's just an awesome one in that style. So yeah, they're just like banger after banger, as we say, on this album. It never lets up, whereas, you know, most Little Feat albums, you could go find them going into styles that you're not particularly a fan of, but just rock solid all the way through this one. Ain't Had Enough Fun. There you go.
Good choice. My number 2, Juanita, Little Dixie Chicken, Be My Dixie Chicken. Great song, yeah. Great album. Yeah. This is their big breakthrough, right? So, you know, third album's a charm. 1973. Classic lineup is firmly entrenched here. Love the title track. Love the kind of jazz funk of 2 Trains. Great song. Roll 'em Easy, like you mentioned. Really cool. Kind of, I don't even know what you call that. Kind of like country blues, I guess. I don't know. It's
yeah.
Describe some of this stuff. I actually like On Your Way Down. I like the kind of laid back groove of that song. Great slide guitars from Lowell on this album. A lot of good keyboards. Walking All Night's kind of that swamp rock thing going on. Again, more really good slide guitars. And man, Fat Man in the Bathtub. What a great song. Even better on the live album. But it's just such a engaging track with a great chorus. Yeah, I mean, you have like 2 absolute drop dead classics on here in Dixie Chicken and Fat Man in the Bathtub, and then a lot of other really good supporting songs that just make this a really, really good album. But I still think I like my number 1 a little bit better, but this is number 2 for me.
I have a feeling we might be having the same number 1 here at, well, we'll see. Actually, there's a couple. So I'm going to go with Sailing Shoes as my number 1. So Sailing Shoes, 1972. This is their second album. Again, this is one that's just full of so many classics, easy to slip with that driving bass line, and yet it's an acoustic song. And again, those Jackson Browne, Warren Zevon, you know, just really, really, you know, emotionally just hits right at your heart. Melodies, you know, but they're sophisticated melodies, right? They're not particularly housewifey. They're like moving into that, like we say, that Steely Dan, trying harder realm. You know, that's the problem with a lot of this country rock. It doesn't try very hard half the time, right? So that's really cool. Trouble is really, really cool as well. And possibly one of the best songs they ever did. And another one of these acoustic songs with a little bit of sophistication to it. Willin' is amazing. Sailing Shoes, another mellow one. And when I look at these, this is that part of Little Feat. Like I love these two things that Little Feat does well. The big progressive, funky, syncopated rockers, and then these mellow Lowell George acoustic kind of songs, which are amazing. And this has a lot of that kind of stuff. A really good deep track on here has Got No Shadow. Again, a cool, typical, complicated kind of one. I don't like Teenage Nervous Breakdown on here at all. I don't like Little Feat doing this kind of thing. I think it was better when Nazareth did it. Nazareth, as we know,
I was going to say that.
Pete Agnew loves Little Feat. Roger Glover loves Little Feat, right? They actually bonded over that in the Nazareth band, right? But I don't need that on here at all. And I don't need Cat Fever at all. It's just like a blues. And I really don't need a political blues, which was covered by Van Halen. Talk about the worst song by Little Feat for Van Halen to cover. I mean, the mind boggles what they would have done with some of those, some of the big band ones, right? But so it's got a few of these blues that I'm not crazy about, but the rest of it, we're just looking at, some of the biggest acoustic hits and the classic Little Feat songs. There you go. Sailing Shoes.
Cool. I just realized I said triple face boogie before. It's tripe face boogie.
Yes.
Not triple. Come on, Pete. All right. My number one is not that.
Okay.
It's actually 1977, Time Loves a Hero.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
I'm a big fan of this. So this is probably right at the tail end of that, what everybody calls their classic period. I still include this in that period, but here they're starting to, their sound is getting a little bit more, I don't know if you'd even say accessible, because most of their music is pretty accessible, but this is, I think, a little more of the funk edge to their music. And I love the liveliness of this album. High roller, killer kick. In fact, they do a lot of really good first cuts on a lot of these albums. Great organ solo. You got horns, you got tasty guitars all over the place. Just a really fun, upbeat, funky song. I love the engaging title track. It's got this kind of bouncy nature to it. I love it. Rockin' in My Pocket. Great song. I love, and I wish they would have done more of it, I love the kind of Latin fusion instrumental Day at the Races. Killer song. I'm a big fusion guy, so I would have loved to have heard them do more of that, because these guys could play that. And there was I'm going to forget the name. A couple of the rhythm section of this band was in a fusion band in the 90s. Oh man, I'm totally forgetting the name of the band. Amazing stuff. And when you listen to this instrumental song, that them doing that was like a no-brainer, because they totally love that sort of thing. What else we got here? Old Folks Boogie. Love that. A lot of groove in that. Red Streamliner's got Michael McDonald on backing vocals. As soon as he opens his mouth, it's him, right? It's like, well, wait a second. Like, there's a Doobie Brothers feel to that song. Oh yeah, Michael McDonald, there he is. Keeping Up with the Joneses, another good kind of swamp rocky song. Just really good album, really solid 10 Templeman production on here. I'm a big fan of this album a lot. That's
interesting. Wow. Yeah. I found myself validated in my early, like all through the years, turning away from those last two albums from the Lowell, and I don't like the Lowell George solo album very much either. So I found myself right in that sort of early part of the 70s thing. And then, like I say, I'm on board for the 80s revival, and I'm totally on board for the Sean Murphy years. And that's when I saw them live, the only time I saw them live. And I got to hang out on the bus and interview them and ask Richie all these Robert Plant questions. It was amazing. I got to drive Fred to look for a Chinese restaurant, drove him around Toronto. So that was a really magical, fun moment for me, because the show that I saw later that night was just incredible, like one of the greatest live shows I ever saw. So that's where my extra fondness for Little Feat comes in, because I don't often get to interview or meet with these guys that are non-hard rock guys, right? So it's always kind of a special thing, and it's always a little nerve-wracking because my knowledge level isn't as high. But that was really cool. But it's interesting to see that. But what are your thoughts on the debut?
I like it. It's one of my honorable mentions. I dig it. I think it's a little less fun You know, it's they, you know, you listen to a lot of these albums and the band sounds like they're having a blast. Whereas this album is a little, and I don't want to say dark because it's not a dark album, but it's kind of like the Grateful Dead's first album or two, right? Which is really different than everything that came right after it. I kind of get that same feeling here. It's a very good album. I enjoy it a lot, but it doesn't quite sound like the Little Feat we know and love from all the stuff that came after it. But I do like it. It is a good album. It's very solid. But it's amazing because you listen to this and then you listen to the second album, and there's a marked difference between the two. And then you get Dixie Chicken, and it takes things even further. And then they kind of settled in that sort of space for a couple of albums. And then I think Time Loves a Hero is different than the couple that came before, because this for me is really, the whole album is really upbeat and kind of funky, and you got horns and all this kind of stuff going on. And then the album after this is very much back to like this country rock thing and really mellow. The last album with Lowell George, really mellow. I mean, you couldn't ask for two more different albums, the last two that he did with them. And then of course, you know, in the 80s, it's, you know, firmly entrenched in the 80s sound, but still captures that Little Feat kind of flavor. But yeah, I like the debut, but it's not quite a top 5 for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I really like Kicking It at the Barn quite a bit, but as I sort of went and re-examined it again, it's a little on the mellow side. You know, we forgot there's one weird one in the middle there in the 90s. Shake Me Up always reminds me of Shake It Up, Cars. But yeah, I think for honorable mentions, it would have been really close for Chinese Work Songs, really close for Under the Radar, really close for the last record album, Time Loves a Hero. I mean, so many of them.
Yeah.
They don't have any bad albums. That's the other thing. It's all, you know, if we were to be crude about it and give them marks, you know, they'd all be like 6s and ups at least, right? Yeah, there's just nothing bad there. Rooster Rag 2012, no Sean on that. And again, you know, I don't know. I just loved all that Sean material so much. And Sean did a lot of, you know, co-lead vocals on here as well. A lot of singers in this band. A lot of guys would share singing. But yeah, just a great catalog, and a little intimidating to talk about, I think.
It is. No, it definitely is. Yeah, I was listening to Represent the Mambo yesterday, and I'm like, I've forgotten how much I really dig Texas Twister. That's that song is a blast. And I remember like when that first came out, that was all over the radio, and you turn on MTV, there they are, and it's just like
Full video for it, yeah.
Yeah, and all of a sudden, like, you know, Little Feat is like this pretty happening band, like, you know, what, 25 years after they first, or more than that, after they first came on the scene. The band I was referencing before that Richie Hayward and Kenny Gradney were in was Uncle Moe's Space Ranch.
Oh, okay.
And I think they did 2 albums. This was kind of like, I think, Tone Center, like a Mike Varney label thing. Total instrumental fusion, really good. I don't even remember. I think Kenny Garcett played guitar. I don't even remember who played guitar on it, but it was really seriously good instrumental jazz fusion stuff. But again, you know, Richie and Kenny they can do that stuff.
Well, and Richie played on Robert Plant's Shaken and Stirred, right? So he's on Robert Plant's Devo album, you know, the most synthesizery, weird, futuristic album. And you get Richie Hayward, who comes from this great, you know, rich funk and Cajun rock past, country rock past, and he's put in there. And yet it kind of works in a strange way. Like Richie is wacky enough that it's that it fits in what Robert's doing on that. So
yeah, you know, so now that I brought it up, I want to get the Uncle Moe's information for everybody here, because I think it's here we go. Uncle Moe's Space Ranch. God, it's been forever since I listened to this stuff. So so here's the band. So it's Scott. Also, it's Brett Garsett, Scott Kinsey. So it's not Kenny. It's Brett Garsett, TJ Helmerich, Scott Kinsey, Gary Willis. Nah, that's not. See, the first album, I think they had 2 different lineups. I'm trying to get the information here on who actually played on this stuff. Moestown was one of the albums, because I'm almost positive it was Kenny and Richie that played on the first album. But of course, you know, I'm trying to use our friend Google here, and I'm not getting any good information here.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I'm looking at my notes here. Let It Roll Man, they had Bonnie Raitt on there, Linda Ronstadt, and Bob Seger as guests. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's like Uncle Mo Spate Rant. Yeah, it says Brett Garsett, Dennis Chambers, Gary Willis, Scott Kinsey, and TJ Helmrich. So none of these guys are on. So I don't know what album I'm thinking of then that Richie and Kenny played on together. It was a fusion band. I'll have to look it up and I'll drop it in the comments for everybody. Sorry about that misinformation. You know, you love when something sparks something in your brain. You're like, oh, wait a second, and now
Fred's been on a million things too, right? Fred Tackett's been on a ton of stuff.
Oh, Fred Tackett, absolutely, yeah. Good player. Cool. Yeah, he released, we reviewed on Sea Tranquility a number of years ago, Fred Tackett's solo album that was really, really good. We're probably going back to like maybe 2005 or something like that, but I don't know what he's done since. But
and we have, just to note, we have lost Richie as well. Richie died in 2010, and Paul Barrere died 2019, just 2 years.
Yeah, recently. Yeah. So tough losses for this band, right? So. Anyway, everybody, there you have it. Our top 5 albums ranked by Little Feat. So in the comments below, feel free, hey, rank the whole catalog if you want, or give us your top 5 or top 10. There's a lot of albums here, but a lot of good ones, and really, really fun band. Kind of an underrated band when you think about it. That's just been around for so long with a lot of solid albums, great songs, and, you know, a live album, which a lot of people consider one of the greatest live albums of all time. So, Martin, you want to plug anything, books coming out, things in stock, stuff you want people to buy that you need to get rid of, you know, all that good stuff?
Yeah, I guess martinpopoff.com for that. For the first time, I do have all of those big coffee table books that have been released so far, except the Heap, but I have supply of the Blue Oyster Cult, supply of the Van Halen, supply of the Thin Lizzy. So there you go, martinpopoff.com.
Cool. Very good. So coming up on the channel this weekend, we've got Jack Toledano and I will be giving our top 10 songs of Metal Church. And we've got a very fun show planned for you this weekend as well. It's kind of like a part 2. So this is going to be called Ultimate Classic Rock Mixtape Challenge. So we've got myself, Sydney Taylor, Craig Seibert, and Jack Toledano trying to put together what we feel is an ultimate classic rock mixtape for someone who's never listened to classic rock before. Is there anybody on this planet who has not listened to classic rock? Hey, you never know. And judging to pick the best one out of the 4 is none other than Mr. Martin Popoff himself. So that's coming up this weekend. Martin's like, I don't know what I got myself into with this one here, but
sounds complicated.
I mean, there's so much to choose from. It's like, you know, I started like just rattling off song, you know, on my list. I started rattling off all these songs and artists, and before you know, you have like 40 of them. They're like, oh, how the hell am I going to whittle this down to a damn cassette tape length, you know? But
well, I promise to be brutal on your lists and say, yeah,
there you go.
We'll point out the inadequacies and the adequacies, I suppose.
There you go. Well,
it's interesting. Yeah, it'll be fun judging this.
Yeah, we'll take whatever you got for us. So you know, it's all in fun though. And if you haven't seen it, the part 1 of this, we did the same thing with kind of hard rock and heavy metal. So we had Lynn Versace judging that, and that was Chris Allo, Rich Catino, and Jack Toledano, and myself for that one. So if you haven't seen that one, watch that one first and then catch the new episode coming this week. And we are planning a progressive rock one in the weeks ahead. So all sorts of stuff happening on the channel. And then, of course, next week we got Hudson Valley Squares Monday night, Tuesdays in the Prague Seat. Wednesday is our What's Hot with Sea Tranquility night. We've just kind of decided that. So that's going to be your day where you're going to get probably a couple videos of, you know, new album release reviews. Thursday is the Monsters Den. And of course, Martin and I are back on Friday morning. So visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. For Martin Popoff, I am Pete Pardo. Have a good weekend, everybody.